Yeah, immediately something comes to mind when I think about your story and your journey that you've been on is that 96% of businesses, startups, fail in their first 10 years. So this, it's always against an entrepreneur of them being successful. And then of that tiny, tiny 4%, 10% of the owners actually get the exit that they actually wanted. So it's a real finite number of people that create a business and the founder gets the exit. But you've been through this and you've sold your company twice. So it's quite a remarkable story.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's something I'm looking forward to tell today.
Yeah, very good. Well, I think let's start from the very beginning. So if you go back to your school days, who were you in school?
So I was in school. I was a bit of a class clown. I guess very much sort of trying to make people around me laugh, friends and people. Not really focused academically. In the end, managed to do quite well for my GCSEs and exams, but in class and my teachers all sort of never looked at me as someone that might go on and achieve something.
Yeah. How did you find school? What was your experience?
I think like most people, I struggled with some parts of it. I was, to a degree, I was bullied at times, but I sort of talk about this with my daughter now. I've got my oldest daughter's 14, and whilst I was bullied, I was sort of sat in the middle of the road, so I ended up being a bully as well, and to a degree. So something I look back on now and sort of with not fond memories, but I think we all have different experiences, but to a degree, none of us truly love the school experience, and I certainly didn't find it easy.
Yeah, I certainly had challenges in school. I just don't feel, I've got to be very aware of this now because my little Logan, who's 4, he's about to go to school next year, and I'm just very acutely aware of maybe some of the challenges he's going to face being a young person going into school for the first time. But, certainly my experience of school was that it probably didn't set me up for life in some ways. Yeah. And in some respects, if you're thinking about entrepreneurism, I just don't think there are any guidelines in school of how to go create, build, find resilience in whether it's in business or in life. But I don't know, what was your experience? How do you feel like school relates itself to entrepreneurism?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the way in which I acted out at school at times was partly because exactly that. I don't think I'm built for the normal 9 to 5. I don't think I was built for to be overly academic, but quite a creative person, free spirit. I want to do things the way I want to do things and move things forward. And definitely at school, I didn't fit that mold. But I think as I talk to my oldest daughter now, I'm constantly talking to her and trying to teach her lessons outside of school that I think I could have done with. Obviously, it's a completely different world generally. But absolutely, I think there is no sort of customization, there's no personalization of the education system to truly understand what someone's learning abilities are, what they were likely to be as they grow up, and try and sort of guide people into careers. It is built to get people either into an office or into a factory. So for people like myself, I ended up acting out. I'm sure others have done different things. Some people may have responded more positively, but myself, it was being the class clown and acting out.
Yeah. How do you feel like that? How did that manifest itself as you kind of went through school, started going into maybe the job market, looking at everything everyone tells us to go off and get a job, get married, buy a house? How did that manifest itself for you?
So as I said, I did relatively well in my GCSEs. I don't think anyone was expecting me to. I did almost everything I did much better than people expected. So the knowledge was going in. It's just in the environment I wasn't necessarily acting in accordingly. But then as I went to the job market, despite having enough qualifications to potentially go on to be able to go to college and potentially even go to university, it was just never in my mindset to do that. So went for more of an apprenticeship model and just went into average call centre jobs, working in offices, nothing spectacular, with no real aspirations that I may do something in life. So I think for the first 4 or 5 years of my working career, it was just all about getting a paycheck, and that was the only thing I cared about. I had no aspirations to have a career or try and build anything up. I'd sort of set myself a bar based on what I'd understood or learnt from school as to what my abilities would have been.
What did that bar look like? What was there aspiration at that stage, or was it?
I don't think so. I think for me, I grew up on a council estate in Sheffield, And I think the aspiration there would have been if you can just escape that council estate and move to a slightly nicer new build estate and live a relatively sort of average life. That would have probably been the limit. I think that I saw myself at the time.
Yeah, I think it's often, from someone's environment, what if you haven't seen someone break through that and break out and turn their life into something being incredibly successful, where's the inspiration? Back then, when we were growing up, there was no social media, there was no internet. I mean, the internet wasn't even a thing.
No.
When if we go back years ago when we were growing up, so you didn't. All you would have is the TV, and then that would seem probably so far. It's like a totally different world.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, when you're talking about, you say Logan.
Logan, yeah.
So obviously your daughter, I've got an 8, nearly 9, and I've got a 14-year-old, and just even now, just the way we parenting is just so different to what it was before, and the risks and the things we've got to consider is a challenge.
How did things progress for you as you went through your apprenticeship and you became sort of a parent, and you were getting housing for the first time?
So I guess as I was going through that period of time, so I moved on from, I think I got a role within a call centre in Chesterfield, where I'd moved to go and live with my now wife, girlfriend at the time. And in there, I had a couple of promotions. So that was probably the first time that I saw there was an opportunity that actually I could do something myself and getting to the point of being a team manager, or at the time I was a team leader, I think. So team managing. So the bar was slowly sort of raising expectations of myself. But I think that came to sort of around about 2007 when I started looking to buy a house, get into our very first house. Which we did. We bought a house, got a mortgage through Northern Rock, which was, looking back, wasn't the pinnacle of wisdom at the time, but who's to know what was about to come. I think the whole world sort of crashed in the back end of 2007, beginning of 2008. So ended up in a huge amount of debt and a whole amount of, I guess, strife trying to get out of that, really. A couple of months later, as that sort of panned out, the business that I was working for ended up downsizing. They liquidated or liquidated a few divisions and scaled down. So I ended up being made redundant about 6 months after we purchased our property. And by that point, because of what happened with Northern Rock and the property crisis, and we fixed into a high interest mortgage. We'd had more than what the house was worth. Out that mortgage, we ended up getting into a lot of debt at that point. So I guess that's the first time where I sort of really fell into a little bit of I guess personal struggle from a financial point of view, and really sort of trying to sort of figure my way through that.
Yeah, I can only imagine how horrific that must be. You feel when you buy a house for the first time, you're so excited. Funny enough, I bought my first house at a very similar time, which was at 2007, 2008, also through through Northern Rock, and funny enough, I've just sold it last week. But that was a funny old time because I remember borrowing way in excess. We had no money down.
Yep.
I was on a £12,000 basic salary, and my partner at the time was on about 13, so 25 grand, and we borrowed about 130,000.
Mm-hmm.
Like the mortgage, I don't know. The way that they structured it was that 75% was the mortgage, and then they put a loan on top at a very high. So they let us have more, and no doubt maybe you were in that kind of situation. But yeah, they really allowed you to rack up the debt significantly.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact structure, but it was like I say, looking back now, it's probably the worst decision that has made it. Sort of led into down such a path when it comes to financial sort of struggle. But yeah, I think because there's all the different timings. Obviously, we borrowed more on it, and then house prices crashed, so the house that we purchased was all now worth even less. So the actual negative equity was even greater. So yeah, a real challenging time, and I guess. Although it's difficult now to purchase a house, and you certainly don't get 95% mortgages much anymore, but it's probably much better generally for people.
Well, it's probably a safer situation for people to be in than to suddenly, 6 months later, you're suddenly, I don't know how much, 6 figures in debt.
Not far off, yeah, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and suddenly that, whereas you thought previously, the 6 months before, wow, we've got a house, great, we're on the ladder, that's a real celebration moment, and then obviously for you, it's turned really dark pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think as a man, I didn't handle it the best. I think I tried sort of being discreet about the situation that was in to friends, to family, to my wife, my girlfriend at the time even. I didn't really disclose to what degree of debt we was in. So I think our spending continued. The struggle that I was having personally, trying to figure out what we were going to do next and where we were going to move to. I didn't really talk to anyone around it. So that was the thing that set me on my spiral mentally to eventually, when I was in a state of depression. But I think the whole scenario, I think, and then the way that led down that path, in part, as much as it was sort of easy to look at the situation of the financial industry at the time and mortgages and that kind of thing, but ultimately I had the opportunity to be much more open around the situation I was in and try and get out of it quicker. But I chose at the time that was the right thing for me was to try and sort of hide a lot of it under the carpet and just try and crack on as best we could.
But also, it's a sign of the times, right? You know, the British stiff upper lip, you know, we don't share, and as men, we don't share these things. We kind of carry the burden ourselves, but then the result of that is that, you know, you are battling a personal battle that no one else knows about, and that's where I feel like, you know, depression and those sorts of things start to happen. It's because, you know, it gets worse and worse and worse, and then you don't want to share. You don't want to share it with your girlfriend.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that my wife now always tells a story that I think the first time she realised how bad we were in is when the bailiff turned up at the door to tell us that if we weren't paid up on a certain debt by 5 p.m. that they'd be coming back with a van and taking furniture. So there was, again, lots of challenging times, lots of mistakes made. But I think as as time progressed and we started working our way through some of those things, it took many years to get back on track, but eventually we got there.
What sort of continued from that point? You mentioned depression. How did that continue?
So I think as we were going through those struggling times, everything that happened, I was made redundant. We had all that debt bounding back up. I couldn't get myself into a proper job. I could only find sort of minimum wage call centre roles or high commission roles. So I could never seem to get back on track from a financial point of view. And they only ever lasted 3 or 6 months on more of a contracted basis. So I think all that momentum that I saw and saw that bar raise of 6 to 12 months earlier around that I might be able to do something with my life, that sort of really compounded that going back to that feeling that no, I'm never going to make it, and I'm expected to be at this sort of level for the rest of my life, and I'm going to be in this kind of situation for the rest of my life. So as sort of things move forwards, again, not talking to anybody, the sort of things I was going through was just almost living 2 lives really, is put my head on the pillow, turning over, crying inside of how bad a situation we're in, or start to get to the point where I think as I was working, I think I spent 3 months where I took some time off sick from one role. My wife didn't know I was off sick because I'd get up every morning, I'd go to, as I was going to work, and I'd go and park my car somewhere and just sit and wait until she'd gone to work and then go back to the house. So yeah, really, really tough times. I think from a male point of view, didn't feel like I could talk to anybody. And it sort of really built up to the point of being suicidal for a period of time. As I look back today, I say those times where I was parking in those lay-bys and spending time just sat there thinking, a lot of that was around just the idea and the principles. Am I better off not being here? Would my wife or girlfriend at the time be better off if I wasn't around? All the trouble that I'm bringing her into. And then you start bringing up things from the past of all the way from childhood and any small childhood traumas, that kind of thing. You start thinking sort of like you're worthless to a degree and have no value to the world. So yeah, real challenging times mentally.
It sounds like a really dark time.
Yeah, definitely. I think when I look back now, it's definitely the darkest place that I've ever been.
Yeah. And I think, you know, when you're looking back into childhood now, here we are quite a few years later, you can probably look back and go, right, there's so much psychology that we all understand a bit more, you know. From childhood, most of us don't feel good enough. You know, that's a thing that we all understood, but you're kind of suffering alone without any context or anyone to share it with. like that was definitely before a time when it was simple to go see a therapist, or gosh, if we went to see a therapist all those years ago, that would be...
Yeah, it never even came up as a consideration for me.
No.
Talking to family, friends, I've got a brother, my dad, got a stepdad, all being great fatherly figures in my life. I'm not someone that's not had that, but even me that's had those fatherly figures and great uncles and things. Even I didn't have the ability to go and express how I was feeling at those times. So the idea of a therapist or anything else to try and get help was not even a consideration. And that's probably a sign of weakness at the time, but that's the sort of thoughts that were going through my head.
I think it was a sign of the times more than anything else. I don't think it was weakness on your part. You know, you were carrying a massive financial burden, but also the burden of you want to be a better man. You don't know how to get out. So when you were thinking, okay, I don't want to be here anymore. Like, what was you mentioned a mindset, which was, would my family be better off without me? Can you just share what that was? What were you thinking there?
So I guess probably two parts of it is my wife. My wife was, again, girlfriend at the time, we was starting to think about getting married and starting a family. But deep down, you start having the thoughts of, does my wife deserve more? Does she deserve better? Once you're in a relationship, obviously you love each other, you want to stand by each other. But if I was to disappear and not be around, and she'd go and meet someone else, she'd have a much better life with somebody else in the future. So it's partly that. It's partly, do I want to bring, if she wants to start a family, do I want to start bringing children into this situation at this stage? It's the thoughts of the pressure that I'm going to put onto my parents if I disclose the situation that we're in, or if it gets any worse, or we get to the point where we're desperate to ask for money, or we lose our house and we have to move back in with parents, all those kind of things. So yeah, it's difficult to now to really put up, to really explain the sort of the thoughts that are going around my head at the time, but it would go from such drastic sort of scenarios on all different sides, and you're always thinking the worst, and no amount of any positive things that people said or anything that was positive that were happening, at that time you're always looking at the worst aspect of it. You're always picking out the negatives and things. So just that constant, I guess that constant dark hole that you're facing into, in itself, it just compounds the feelings that you're already feeling. And yeah, really, sort of, like I said, it really takes you further into that dark hole, and it's a real challenge to get out of.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you said there, which is it compounds, which is like every day it just gets worse and worse and darker.
Yep.
Until you're in a position where you just can't see a future, you can't see a way out. Yeah,
and every red letter that comes through the door, every knock at the door, you worry it's bailiffs again. Yeah, there's every little thing. It just, and again, my depression came off the back of that sort of more financial struggle that we was in, and as compounded with some of those other things around that feeling of not being worthy and not being good enough. But certainly when you're in those scenarios, it's almost like every week there's a new letter, illegal letter through the door. There's bailiffs, we had Provident. I don't know if everyone knows what Provident is nowadays, but those that do will be aware that we had Provident come round and collect their cash, and you've got to make sure that's paid on time. So all these different things, yeah, it makes it very difficult to climb out of. There's no quick fix for it.
Tough.
Yes, definitely.
Tough. Unbelievably tough. You did go on and have a daughter?
Yeah, so that's where I think for me, that was a turning point. Like I said, we was trying to plan a marriage. Now when I look back, and sometimes I talk to my friends and things, and people talk about I try and sort of talk about them in like funny stories, but trying to plan a marriage. My wife, we started, as you do, come off the pill a little bit before, thinking it might take you some time to get caught. Turns out we got caught pretty quickly. Ended up finding out we were pregnant a couple of months before we were due to get married. We ended up getting married, or booking a wedding in Jamaica, purely because it was the cheapest thing for us. We could get our wedding that someone paid for our trip, and then we put £1,000 wedding package on top of it, whereas everybody else paid for themselves to come. So instead of having thousands of pounds for a church wedding or a big do afterwards, in a hotel, it cost us next to nothing. But when we was in Jamaica, I remember I had to go into the internet cafe and get a payday loan to be able to pay for the flowers on the for the wedding. So, and like I said, when I look back, I try and look back those funny moments when I look back now as to how stupid I were at the time. But yeah, we ended up getting married. My daughter was born in the following January 2011, and that was almost that night my wife stayed in the hospital with my daughter. I went back home and didn't sleep a wink. Effectively, I was just up all night thinking, "Right, we've got to get out of this situation now. We've got to do something." I was at the job, so I guess it's about 15 years ago now. But I was stacking cages in a Tesco's distribution centre, and that was the time I started looking. Okay, what can I do? What are my skills? What can I try and get into? What have I done in the past? How can I move forward? How can I get that job? And probably for the last 3 years, I just floated from job to job to job, in that state of depression. Like I said, I'd spent time off sick, spent time just sat in my car, not going to work, gone through all that period of depression and been suicidal for around about 6 to 7 months, thinking and ideating on what I would do and how I would do it, and attempted suicide once that failed, and then you get those thoughts of, can't even do that right. But when I had my daughter, that was the point where I really sort of twigged that, I've got to get out of this for her sake. And then from there went on to apply for a few jobs back into call centres, because that's what I knew. Managed to do pretty well there. But here, when for the first time in 3 or 4 years, when I got in there, I was immediately thinking about, okay, what's the next phase? How do I get back to that team leader role? How do I move on to the next business and really put my heart and soul into that role? Whereas before that, I'd turned up and I'd barely earned my living. In reality, I was there and I was doing the tasks, but there was no passion involved in it. But for the first time, once I had my daughter, that sort of really tricked my mindset.
Sounds like your daughter was a significant change for you.
Yes.
But can I just before that, if you don't mind me asking, and if I go too deep, that's fine. But but like you said, there was a failed suicide attempt. Like, what were you thinking at that time? Was that before your daughter?
Yeah, so that would have been around about 12 months prior to that. I think it was just as we were starting to talk about a wedding.
Right.
I think it was probably the again, just that thought of already thinking around, is my wife better off elsewhere? And that was that commitment level. And again, I just wanted to marry my wife, loved her to bits, but I guess looking for an escape in reality from the situation that I was in. I wasn't man enough to talk to her around how I was feeling, the things that we were going through. So in my head, the easiest option is there something I can do to, I guess, escape permanently. So yeah, I'm thinking about it, I sort of struggled to think around exactly what was going through my mind, but it was around that time that it was around the wedding, or starting to think about a wedding.
At what point did your wife, back then girlfriend, obviously, if it was a failed attempt, I don't know what happened. Did you then go to hospital? Did she fight? What happened? How did she reconcile? How did she get to find out?
So much later, it wasn't as drastic as needed to go to hospital or anything like that. It was pills, and I was away alone, so ended up passed out in bed for quite a bit of time. But there was no one there to find me. That situation, it just happened. So it wasn't until years later that my wife sort of recognised that I'd been in such a dark place, to be fair. Right. So it was once we came out of it, and I've sort of looked back, and over time, just loosely, slowly sort of talked about those dark days where I think she knew that I was struggling in depression, but not to the degree that I was.
I think that's the interesting thing, is because when you just talk to somebody, you've got no idea what's going on inside their mind, like no idea at all. And families have lost good men because they haven't shared, or they've been battling something in silence. Yep. And it just breaks my heart that, I think we're in a different reality today. Like everything's moved forward a lot, and it's, there's a whole movement around talking how are you doing? Open conversation. Therapy is very accepted, if not encouraged, all by it for everyone. Like, I think we're in a very different world now, but back then it wasn't like that
Yeah, no,
at all.
and
So you weren't, you said, yeah, you were a representation of men at the time. I think that's a very fair reputation. Men suffered in silence. That was the real reality.
Yeah, and I think to a degree, even now, still probably do. I mean, there's much more support groups now, and there's some that I sort of try and raise money for and awareness of and things. I think there's definitely more support out there, but to a degree, I think there is still an underlying problem with men not talking. Even I, to this day, don't open up as much as I should and talk about things. Much better than I once was, but to this day, probably still not as much as my wife would like or people around me. But yeah, I think it's definitely been an issue, but still an issue that needs to be solved and listened to more.
Why do you feel so today, even now, like it's still hard for men, whether it's you or just men in general? Why do you think it's hard for us to open up?
Men want to be strong. They want to carry the weight of the work. They want to carry their families. They want to put people on the shoulders and support and provide for them. And showing your emotions is sort of contrary to that belief that we've had. And it's not saying it's right or wrong. And I sort of despise the sort of toxic masculinity argument that goes around at the minute. But in reality, we've had thousands of years where that is the case. And things will change over time, but that doesn't happen in the space of a few years. It will take many more years before that sort of fully sort of flushes out a little bit more. We've had thousands of years of just having to be big, brave and strong. This is how it comes out in modern society now, I guess.
And also, as men get older, we get lonelier.
Yes.
Like, there's no question.
Yep.
I'm mid-40s now, and I've got no one around me.
Yeah.
Like it, and you have your family, and you have those sorts of people around you, maybe a couple of close friends or whatever. But as you get older, you do lose contact with people.
Yeah, I think men more than women. I think as you get older, women tend to go out for coffee more often or have a glass of wine or whatever it might be with friends. I think men spend less and less time with their friends, more time trying to be successful in work, or when they get home from work, it's spending time with the kids and family because they're working hard during the day. And it's not saying that all women don't. It's obviously very a generalist comment to make, but I think definitely for men, I myself, for almost up until the last 3 or 4 years, my group of friends, every time I've moved on from work or business, I lost all my school friends because I moved from Sheffield to Chesterfield, and it's not actually that far, but we just sort of drifted away. And then I got a small group of friends at one workplace, and as we sort of all moved on, they sort of drifted away. Probably only now that I've got a group of friends that I think I'll be hopefully trying to, and I guess consciously making an effort now to spend more time with, and occasionally go out, and we'll go out and have a snooker day here and there and do things. But yeah, once upon a time, I think that's a conscious effort that I'm recognising that I need personally, because that's my time to get out. And again, men don't go there and talk about emotions, but we take the mick out of each other. We have fun, we have a laugh, we talk about things in a different way. But it helps me, and I think it helps them, and I think it's definitely something that more men should consciously do.
Well, I think the way that we are good at releasing those emotions is banter.
Yes.
Right. And when you're with your mates, and you can have banter, but we're pretty crude when we're with each other, right? Yep. So like that is a way of releasing, but you also feel accepted. If one of my best mates calls me something, like, which I won't say on this podcast, but like that's endearing.
Yes.
It's like great. Yeah. Like I want to be called that by you.
Yep.
So it's
we're strange characters, man. When you consider in this modern society now, especially people of our age that have grown up like that pre-internet age, we are strange. It is difficult to people to sort of assimilate and get sort of more modern. But yeah, definitely that banter, that interaction that men have as groups of men, is just, I think people look at it as quite strange nowadays.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So your daughter becoming your inspiration.
Yes.
That night she was born, it's almost like a switch. Something changed in your mind, which I've got to fix this. It
was, and I have this conversation with her all the time, that I've got such a special bond and relationship with her because of that. We wouldn't be where we are today as a family if she didn't come along at the time she came along. But yeah, like I say, for me, it was this. Here's a real switch and a trigger for me to go on and build up some motivation and momentum, and everything that I was trying to do was around her, and trying to make sure that I can give her a better life than I've had, a better head start potentially, and make sure she sees me as a father figure that she can be proud of. But yeah, so from there, I went on to, like I said, get a bit of passion back around trying to do well for myself, get that career back, and went into a position that was telesales, moved on to more of a commercial sales, and eventually got like a BDM type role and out on the road selling. And that was I think for the very first time, that was where I saw that I had a skill set that sort of led itself well to entrepreneurism and trying to build something. At the time, I didn't think about going and building something, but I saw the skill set there that I could do something more than what I thought for the last 10, 15 years.
Well, and what was that skill set? Was it sales? Was it communication? What
I think
did you
sales
start?
and communication. I'm an introvert by nature, but give me something that I'm passionate about and can talk about, and I can have conversations quite authentically, and people, I find, hopefully, fingers crossed. I've certainly spent the last 10 years believing this to be the case, that people believe in me. So when I say I'm going to do something, I tend to deliver it. And that comes across quite well in conversation. So I was never the typical salesman that had the pitter-patter that could go and use all the sales techniques, but I could just have genuine, open, honest conversations about what the challenges were, what we could do to fix them, whether we were the right partner, and how we'd go about delivering on that. That I did quite well through that sales process, as well as I think from sort of some of the benefits that I think I've built up over time through those dark days is a level of resilience that I don't see in many people nowadays. Not just from people saying no in a sales pitch, but when things are consistently not going well, or as we get moving to the sort of story of my business, when there's sort of those prolonged down periods, being able to always have that belief that here's the goal, here's what we're aiming for, and we're going to get there. We might need to pivot, we might need to change, but so I think that resilience that I've built up during that initial period, combined with that sort of sales skill set, that communication ability, I guess just an ability to sort of see the bigger picture, and put the pieces together, I think, as a whole.
It's interesting because it's almost like you went that period of depression and the debt. See, the debt came first, then the depression. But what that almost did for you is it gave you a level of understanding about life and the harshness of how life can be, which when you come out of that gives you resilience.
Yes. But
you're even in the tone and the way you're communicating now, it's almost like after your daughter was born and you're starting to go out and sell and get some kind of feedback and communicate, it's almost like that's turned into optimism.
Yep.
Of actually there's something here.
Yeah, definitely. And like I say, it's just that. Like I said, I think some of those days there that got to a point where undying belief that I can be better than I am today, and that's what I was striving for. And not in some wishy-washy sort of well-being way, but just I can do better than I thought I could. I've already proven that, and just those small wins. I think taking those small wins on. Like I said, I got into that role in telesales, and I moved on within 3 to 4 months, and I moved on again within 6 months. So just that incremental build-up proved to me that actually there's a ceiling there, but I don't know what it is. It's not where I thought it was. It's definitely higher, but I don't know how far it is. Let me test it and let me figure that out. So it's definitely a mix of optimism, but as much of anything, I think that desire to do better for my daughter was one of the key drivers.
How do you go from? Sounds like by this point you've worked most of your way out of debt.
Not quite, but probably got to a plan and a position where I could see a attraction to getting out of debt over a couple of years. Yeah.
Okay. But you're also beginning to get some skills.
Yep. And
some belief. How does that transition? And I think about this a lot when I speak to entrepreneurs, and it's all in my mind. I always think about what's the moment of when you get started, where you're going from I've got a job to now I'm running a business, and then there's obviously maybe a loss of earnings, or there's always that consideration of how long can I make this last. And actually, you've got a risk of going back into debt quite significantly. And that's why I shared the stat at the beginning: 96% of businesses fail, and that could a lot of that is down to finances or those things. What did the transition look like from you going from this sales role where you're building knowledge and belief into leading a business? How do you combat that transition?
Yeah, so it weren't as fluid as that for me. I was working in a business that was in the renewable space, selling solar into councils and social housing. Right at the end of the sort of original solar boom, where the government reduced the feed-in tariffs. So the business that I was in had a bit of a decline in opportunity. They could recognise that. So whilst I was selling solar into those businesses, I was asked to go and figure out new opportunities, effectively to look for new revenue streams. So I started exploring a variety of things, and EV charging and electric vehicles was just starting to take off to a degree. So I started looking and exploring that, did a bit of a deal with, for the business that I was in at the time, did a bit of a deal with one of the charge point manufacturers at the time, to be able to be the first company that can sell their products directly. So they sold directly to consumers and businesses, and they didn't sell any hardware elsewhere. So I did a deal for that. I think I talk about this quite a lot. For me, my journey into running a business was a little bit of right place, right time, dumb luck, naivety, and then I don't know if you like swear or not on this podcast, but a whole heap of fuck it, what's the worst that can happen? And I think because I'd already had that level of seeing how bad things can be, I'd got to that point now, which is my sheer belief that I can do better. I didn't believe that I could ever get that bad again. So if it doesn't work out, I'm not going and setting up a business that has a ton of costs so that I couldn't quickly pivot and get another job if I needed to, or work part time anywhere to make it work. So I did it in a way. It ended up happening in a way that alleviated some of the risks that I had to a degree. But effectively, the business that I was working for and doing all that work and did that deal for they went bust. All of a sudden, one day, containers turned up to collect all the stock, and everyone was told to go home. So I'd had this part-baked business idea and plan and a bit of a contract typed up but not yet signed by either party. I took all that, went home, sat down, figured out is there anything I could do on the back of that. Ended up getting in touch with a family friend who was an accountant, running through some ideas and a bit of a business plan with him. He agreed to support with an investment of £5,000 to get going, which would effectively pay my salary for 3 or 4 months until we build up some of the revenue in the business. Went to the charge point manufacturer that we did the deal with. In a meeting, I actually walked into the meeting. He thought we were there at that point to sign as the original business. I put the deal on the table for him. Briefly explained, look, I'm here now to get this signed, but just FYI, the contract's now in a different company name. That business is liquidated, but I can still deliver everything that I've promised for you. And because I was able to look him in his eyes, will you trust in me to deliver this for you? And we did the deal and set up the business and went forwards. And that was effectively supporting EV drivers that had more complex than some other people like to deal with installations, whether they be businesses or at home. And the 2 or 3 main companies in the space at the time, they just really focused on the really easy stuff. So I was able to work with, I didn't have any employees, no electricians. It was just me taking on from my experience. You've got this challenge. None of these other companies want to support it because you're too complicated for them. How do I make it work? How do we get the product to you? How do we get it installed in a way that makes sense for you? And I'll bring in a contractor to go and install that. So you pay me, I'll figure the rest out, and I'll pay the contractor to install it. And we did that and built that up for probably around 12 months over social media, just getting involved in EV forums, that kind of thing. But yeah, so my journey wasn't necessarily a conscious, hey, I think I'm ready to get into business. It was right place, right time, and let's just give it a go, see what happens.
Yeah. It's incredible, isn't it? That unique opportunity arose at that time where a business was failing, a contract was there. Yep. You've still got to have the balls to go in and sit in front of someone to say, will you trust me with this?
Yeah, and none of my family did. Everyone that I spoke to, that as I was going through that initial phase, they was all telling me just go get another job. Don't do this. It won't work. You've not proven that you can deliver this kind of thing. You're just getting back on track. You're just getting to a solid base financially. Don't do it. Just go get a job. So yeah, I think when that first 3 to 6 months, and I could start seeing that revenue was coming in, and that original investment that sort of paid me a salary that was spent to a degree, and then revenue was coming in, I was able to continue paying myself consistently, not huge amounts, but consistently enough. And you could see the traction in the business growing and the volumes growing and things. Yeah, it was. And again, as I talked about, for me, it's those quick wins. You've got to take stock of those quick wins. I think that's something that I would tell any business owner, any entrepreneur, take stock of the quick wins and the small wins, because they all add up and they all build that little bit of confidence and experience and knowledge.
Yeah. It's interesting that all your friends and family were saying, don't do this. What was it inside you, or what was it that said, no, I'm going to trust myself this time?
I think it was partly because I think I'd known where I'd come from and what I thought was the worst could have been was, and I knew what that was like, and I'd already made it out of that once. And I think secondly, it was just that pure belief that my daughter Olivia had given me, that I could do something, and I'd seen it again, taking those small wins, just seeing that bar raise consistently and over time, just made me just want to test that to a degree. But it was that I'm a gambler by nature. I like gambling, that kind of thing. So the idea that actually there's a bit of risk to it. I can sort of alleviate the risk a little bit, but the upside could be huge if it works out well. And I want to test myself and prove. And this rarely do you get those opportunities come up. If I was to think it that a different way, if I'd have passed on that opportunity, how could I potentially set up a business in the future and grow something? It would be much more difficult. It would be much harder. The right place, right time. It was just ultimately, if I don't do this now, I may never.
And how did the business grow from there? So it sounds like that first 12 months you were kind of living on breadcrumbs, but because you'd been able to sign that contract, it gave you enough, and you had the investment just to cover off your salary. So it sounds like you were able to kind of muddle through, make it work for that first 12 months. How did the business start to grow after that?
Yeah, so bootstrapped it for the first 12 months. Did some good deals beyond that original deal with some other manufacturers. Slight hiccup, probably 18 months or so into the business, where the original business partner that I was working with, we ended up liquidating that business, not from a debt perspective, but just purely so I could start from scratch. Because the business partner was just trying to extract as much money out of the business as he could to get his investment back and things, whereas I was trying to keep as much money in the business so we could grow and really focus on that. So we sort of rebranded, restarted again in 2015. But at that point, we went straight into, because of the success we was having and the deals that we'd done and deals that we'd been able to negotiate with some of the other manufacturers, we started recruiting our own office-based teams. We started recruiting our first installers. So we was no longer just me running the day-to-day and doing everything. From my dining room table, we'd got an office space, we'd recruited our first electricians, got our first office team, and really started being now a genuine EV charge point installer, an electrical contractor that could deliver installations that specialised in EV charging. And yeah, from there, it was all around just going out and winning more contracts, trying to drive. We still had a strong base through for our direct-to-consumer work, through work that we're doing on social media and forums for new drivers. But then we started going building relationships with car dealerships and businesses out there.
The business grew. It went from strength to strength. You started to get some office staff, some people as money was coming in.
Yep.
Eventually, you get to the point where you sell the business.
Yep.
What did it look like running into that, or running up to that period of time? What was the purpose of the exit of the sale?
So we were starting to grow, and we'd got really close with one particular manufacturer to the point that we was almost exclusive with them. And I've been able to negotiate some really, really fair terms. And a lot of the industry was operating on government grant funding at the time. So every installation you delivered, you got some grant money, and that gets paid sometimes 6 months, sometimes 12 months in arrears, just whenever the government decide that they want to write those checks. But so it was really challenging as a business from a cash flow point of view. But I'd done a deal with a manufacturer to really try and support that, so that we buy the product, install it, and we the money we claimed from the consumer was ours, and then once we finally got the grant money back, we paid the charge point. So we weren't just working on a typical 30 days or 60-day terms. At that point, could be 90, 120 days sort of that we needed on those individual pieces of hardware. But that particular hardware was installed on that property and would pay you once the government for that particular installation came through. So I'd managed to negotiate those kind of deals. But then the market was starting to open up a bit. So what happened was as new products were coming in that were better, they were smarter, they were better looking, they were more modern, they had more features, we wanted to bring them onto our lineup so we could sell them to our customers. But almost immediately as we started doing that, the original manufacturer was, so you don't want our terms. And then we had this real strong, but actually 95% of our business was this one manufacturer. And we was only at an early stage where a couple of installations a week were delivered by these other charge points. So we had to slow down, we had to maneuver those for the website, and they had a bit of a stranglehold. So probably my first lesson in business there is to not get too close with any one manufacturer. But it helped us. It's one of those scenarios that sometimes some of these deals help you so far, but can be quite difficult to unpick at a later stage. So really the investment was around giving us somebody that could help us cash flow that transition for us. So we was already talking to a few different people, some large projects that were coming on board, and one of them was an energy company. And as we explained that we were starting to look for investment, they effectively put a bid in and made an offer, and I sold 51% of the business to that energy company.
What was it's an amazing journey. What's the significance of the 51%?
So yeah, I think that's my second lesson in business is probably that 1% is worth just as much, if not more, than the original 50 when it comes to decision making. The relationship was great and everything went ultimately in the end things went well, but you just lose control of decision making at that point. And some of the things that we to a degree, I guess the value of my remaining 49% was hard for me to control what that could look like if I couldn't make the decision to do things that I wanted to do for our business. And we were only part of the business and the group, but ultimately we had to pivot and change direction depending on what the parent company wanted to do. So yeah, I think from huge value, I think in making sure you get those deals structured right, and me being a bit naive in those businesses, I didn't take the right advice. I'm very, I trust in people. We have a conversation. You're going to do something. I trust that that's what's going to happen. And I recognise in business that's not quite how things work. So I didn't protect myself enough in the agreement to some degree. But yeah, I think making sure you get those deals structured correctly is hugely important.
So with you losing your decision-making power, how did that impact kind of the remaining part? But how did that impact the business ultimately? Because if you've built this as a founder from the ground up, and now you can't be the key decision maker in your own business.
Yeah, so my vision was always to build a hardware agnostic installation service that went one step further than being an installer and owning the customer journey throughout. And to this day, with the business that I led, ChargedEV, are the biggest and best at what we do. We have the best customer journey, deliver the most installations, but being product agnostic was a huge part of that, because I think that's what consumers need. And when you're partnering with lease companies or car dealerships or manufacturers, they're selling, if it's Ford, they're selling 10, 15 variations of their vehicles. Or if it's a lease company, they're selling every manufacturer and every model. Why do they want to partner with one single piece of hardware? So a huge part of our business model was around that. And that's the reason why I went for that investment in the first place. But pretty quickly after moving across, the parent company did a deal with a different charge point manufacturer that also have a network. And then at the very last minute, just decided to include ChargedEV into that. Without my notice, I wasn't aware. Already signed the contract. So within the space of 3 months, we had to move from one manufacturer that we were trying to unpick from a little bit, but not completely move away from, to introduce 4 or 5 new, modern brands, innovative brands that were coming into the space. And they did a deal with probably the oldest charge point on the market that was already 2 or 3 years out of date. And we had to move it to be exclusively install those for the next 3 years. So the entire business model I was trying to build completely changed. My vision could be no more. I had to pivot and change that.
Wow, that's that feels also, I mean, it's so far from your vision.
Yes.
How did that then sort of manifest and progress from there? Because you're now on a senior leadership team, you don't agree with the strategy. I can only ever see fallout from what happens at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, there was lots of conversations, and I'm not an abrasive person. I don't, so that I wasn't getting too emotional about it. And for me, I'd sort of moved past that point where that, to a degree, that I'm just going to make the best of it. And again, I think because of where I've come from, and I'd never expected to be in the situation I was in, I've always led the business in, to a degree, a little bit of what will be, but I've already done far better than I ever expected. That bar's always been, I've smashed through that bar for the past 4 or 5 years, that if this is it, and that's all it is ever going to be, and we don't quite get any bigger, then so be it to a degree. An element of disappointment and wanting to try and push forward and find ways around it, and I'm quite resourceful and resilient, that we're always trying to work things through. But so there weren't huge amounts of tension to a degree. We had an initial conversation, lots of surprise and a little bit, but then quickly moved back. Well, okay, that's where I want it to be, but we're not. What's the new vision? What we're going to build now? How we're going to make it work? And there was definitely a couple of years of challenging times. We're trying to compete directly with the manufacturer of a product with their product, and we can't necessarily beat them on price. How do we go about doing that? So we had to sort of make sure we double down on the quality of installation, the compliance side of things, and all the things that we could then become our big USBs and develop that business model. So we did okay for a couple of years, and we saw some probably 12 to 18 months of sort of stagnation, and then started to build and scale back up again a little bit as the market grew as well. And then the parent company, a clause within their contract, they was able to produce their own products if they wanted to. So they brought a new product to market. So we eventually had a second product in there after around 18 months, which gives a little bit of flexibility. And we started to scale that again beyond that. So there was definitely challenges. There were awkward conversations and things. But for me, it's always about just got to learn to pivot as quickly as possible. You've got to be agile. And you've got to sort of find a new way of working if need be. There's no point sort of lingering on too much of the bad stuff when it happens, or the disappointing things. It's just a case of, right, here's the new normal. What do we do now?
What sort of, when we're talking about the business, you mentioned obviously as part of the journey you built the back office staff and the engineers, etc. What sort of size was the business around that time?
So when we sold the business, we was probably, for the first time, it was 8 or 9 installers employed, maybe 8 people in the office. So 16, 17 people in the business. We grew that throughout the years to around about 35 installers up and coming to around about 2020. Back in 2019, I think it was about 35 installers. We had an office team of somewhere in the region of 15.
Right. And what sort of revenues were you producing?
Somewhere in the region of 5-6 million.
Was it? Yep. Wow. It's amazing, isn't it, to go from nothing, from an idea and an opportunist moment where with no revenue, a conversation with your accountant, to now you're leading a business which is 5 million turnover. Yeah,
and again, that's not happy-go-lucky, but that's a little bit. Sometimes you sort of pinch yourself and you look back and things. That's partly why my constant sort of go-to state is, well, okay, what next? What we're going to do now? It's never harp on things too long. It's again, because of going back to the dark days, I've seen been through really tough times. Anything that came up in that period now, where actually, in reality, things are going really well. Why am I worried just because something's changed slightly, or I can't quite deliver what I wanted to deliver over here? Just find a way to pivot. You've done it once in the past. Just find a way to deal with it. I never let those negative or those challenging times get sort of too embedded in my brain or thought set.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because when you've been through real dark times, and like what you've shared with us today, which is with suicidal thoughts, but also attempting suicide, and also being heavily in debt. Really dark times during that period of time, which obviously you've kind of reached the depths of human existence in some respects. So you're talking about something not quite going your way in a boardroom, but you're already still doing really well. So,
Yes.
so it just allows you, even if maybe you get some knockbacks, or just shows the level of resilience you've built. You're actually all like, well, I'm still grateful to be here. I'm still grateful to be in this situation, to be in this boardroom, to be leading this business. It's a complete flip in the mindset. Whereas you were talking before about it was compounding and getting worse. This is compounding and getting better.
Yes.
But you've got to take some knocks on the journey as well.
Yeah, and it's those knocks that teach you. You don't learn anything through the failures. I've sort of coined the term now to a degree, like chronic failure. You've got to go through those times. You've got to have those setbacks. You've got to have those disagreements and those things where it don't quite go to plan, or you thought you were going to do X and it didn't quite work out. Whether that's because you got that wrong or someone else has put something on you and made a decision or done something that affect that, you've just got to keep learning and making sure everything you do, you're sort of taking stock of, trying to learn as best you can from it and move forward, which is always difficult during the journey. Now I've sort of left the business for the second time, and I've had probably 6 months now. I actually think as I look back now, I think I was learning a little bit through that journey, but now I can look back in a completely different light to all those lessons and then really reevaluate them and actually put them to practice a lot better than what I did during. So I think you've got to make sure you're always looking back as well and just refining what you've learned over time and comparing the notes.
The thing is, when you're in it, it's hard to see the lesson.
Yes.
It's only when you can reflect years later, when it's kind of had time to settle, you can think back to a time and go, okay, I get it now. I understand. So you said you've left the business now. You shared with us that you had 49% of the business. What happened when you went through that exit for the second time?
So taking back a step, I mentioned get to the end of 2019, 2020, where we had about 35 installers, and a team overall of around about sort of getting towards around 50. Doing okay, relatively well. We were well positioned in the market. We got a couple of really good contracts. Two things happened. Is the energy company that we was part of went and acquired a different energy business in the January. So that's a huge undertaking to bring another energy business together and try and integrate them. But then COVID came along. So March 23rd, I think it was, 2020, the group made a decision to sort of take all installers out of the field, no longer going in customers' homes, set them down, put them on furlough. So effectively, our entire business stopped. And my during that period, I was still in the business, but I couldn't see any out. There was a deadline to look forward to around September later that year. But in reality, what happened was while we was in that position, and the energy company decided to look at their entire strategy and business model. So they'd done lots of investments over years into business like mine, and they'd actually invested in a charge point manufacturer. They invested in like a smart heating business and some other businesses. They reevaluated those, and I think they started the process of looking at how they release some funds or some focus from across their leadership team from those businesses to look back at that transition. Whereas I think initially they might have planned of integrating over a 2 or 3 year period the two energy companies. They saw the COVID time and opportunity to really condense that down and try and integrate that as soon as possible. But they didn't have the energy to be, or the manpower and the people to be able to do that whilst supporting me, while supporting these other businesses. So they ended up selling shares of their EV charge manufacturer business to an investment fund and another large corporate. Another business got put outside of the group. So during that time, I did a deal to acquire the business back. So spent 2 or 3 months. All the people by that point, because they'd already made the decision to sort of not trade as ChargedEV anymore, running that business. So majority of the team was made redundant. And then I did a deal to go and buy the brand back, set up a brand new limited company, but bought the brand to trade as ChargedEV from the energy company. And we went live again in August the 3rd of 2020. Re-employed around 60% of the installation. Around 60% of the office staff, and we brought back around about 30% of the field staff into the business, and just really scaled it down. And started from scratch effectively from that period. Went out with a couple of contracts and scaled from there.
Wow. What a journey.
Yeah, it was. It's been fun. It's been challenging. It's been tearful at times. I think as I looked back, that's that period where they'd announced that they was pulling out some of those businesses, and the ChargedEV team was potentially going to be made redundant. That's probably the closest I'd been to sort of falling back into depression, because we were just starting to sort of really creep up. and see some opportunities for some real growth. So when that was first announced, I think I can remember everyone was working from home. I was still going to the office every day, so there's me in this office, huge office by myself, and I'm working on that. Announcement gets made. I had to go on a call to the entire team. I've got lots of good relationships with these people, and I'm quite for me, the people and the team around you are some of the biggest assets in any business. And I think some of the relationships that I'd formed with our installers, I might only see once or twice a year, our office team that I see almost every day, the HR team at the energy company offered to come on and do the whole process, and I was like, no, they're my people. I want to get on that. I'll break the news. Let me take that. But I think after that, I sort of closed my laptop. Everyone had just been made redundant, or advisor was at risk of being redundant. I went to an office and I went to our breakout area, just sat on the settee, laid back and cried. And so that's the first time that I felt like I'd always had that real positive nature. If stuff happens, you just pivot and you get on with it. This was that first point where I was actually, no, this is bad. I'm going to have to get back into figure something else out or go get a job or whatever it might have been. But then I also think about all the people that we'd brought on a journey, all the relationships that we've built, the community that we'd formed. And yeah, so thinking about all those people was a real sort of kick in the teeth. If it was just me, I can sort of figure me out a little bit and I can worry about myself. But when you've got, at the time, probably sort of 50 to 55 people that are going to be in dire straits at a time that you couldn't go into the open job market. At that time, everyone was working from home, furloughed, whatever it might have been. They wouldn't have been able to find a job quickly. So yeah, that was the first time that I sort of really felt a bit of risk that I might have fell back or slipped back into.
The thing is, you're not thinking about you. You're thinking about, this is beyond business. This is humans.
Yes.
This is people you work with every day and people you care about.
Yep.
And then you know that they're being made redundant. You know, I can understand why you would slip back into depression, or, you know, you'd feel deeply emotional yourself because, you know, you're trying to support people and it's not going to happen, or it's not happening.
Yeah. And I think like with the community that we created and the team and the relationships that we'd built, after that 5-10 minutes of crying, whatever it was, I sat up, picked my phone up, and I just had message after message after message from the entire team. Not one of them was, why, what's happening, this is terrible for me. Almost every single one were, how are you? Are you okay? And I think that was the bit where it just sort of really hit home, as the sort of those types of relationships that we built and the people around. That just almost shook me back into, for that 10-minute time, I slipped a little bit. For that, it really shook me back into a bit of a, what's the pivot? What's next? How do we do this? And I almost, that afternoon, went straight back, picked the phone up, and then to the energy company, what can we do? What options are there? And it was almost, what do you mean, what are the options? Like, can I take it on myself? Can I buy it back? What's that going to look like? What do we need to do? And there's all heaps of contracts to figure out, and what happens with maintenance and warranty and of all the products that we've installed today, and what happens with the brand and how we deliver that, and the installers, and all these different kind of things to figure out. But almost straight away it was okay, yeah, let's have that conversation. So then next day we had a meeting, we sat down, we figured out what are the steps, what could it look like, what would it need to be, and start building that plan to sort of tick it out of the group again and build it from scratch.
It's so interesting because this is like the dark side of entrepreneurship, where
nobody sees.
No one sees this part. Everyone hears about the glory.
Yep.
You know, the glory of, we built this business, we sold it for 100 million. Look at us, aren't we so smart? You know, and that's why I shared the stats at the very beginning, was that is like 0.0001%. That is like, that's messy. You know, that's like, I mean, Lionel Messi plays for Barcelona, or used to play for Barcelona. I'm like, that's like the top
the
percentage.
pinnacle. Yeah.
That's the pinnacle, and that's why you hear about it. But the reality of business and entrepreneurship is far more akin to the realities that you're going through, which is you've got to make people redundant. There's other people, there's buyouts, there's complexity, there's financial struggle, there's real hardship. You know, that feels like a far more real story to me.
Yeah, I think, like I say, I think more people can resonate with that's because they've been through it themselves, or they're entrepreneurs that have had those things, or they're entrepreneurs that are scaling, they've not not got to those levels yet, but they want to be aware of them, or just everyday life can be very similar. All the struggles and strife in everyday life can people can resonate and understand that difficulty. So I definitely think, as I sort of look back, my story that I talk today and the ones I'll talk to my kids about, and anytime I go and mentor anybody, it's all about resilience and really understand there's no failure. There's lots of small failures, lots of little bits where you've not quite won or you've not delivered what you wanted or whatever it might be. But it's building on the back of those that's the real key to success.
So when you've structured a deal for you to get the business back.
Yep.
Under your control. So now you've got 100% of the business back.
Yep.
Any debt?
Nope.
Okay. Bought for a pound.
Bought for a pound. Did a contract with around maintenance and things that put a bit of cash in the bank. And I guess this is where we did okay out of that. I think in our favour, it worked quite well based as it was at the time. I guess to a degree, this is probably where second, third, fourth wave COVID probably didn't quite want us to succeed as well. But we did a really good deal to bring it out. If COVID, as it were, we were coming out of that first phase of COVID and that first sort of lockdown a little bit. And if that would have been the end of COVID, we'd have gone on to, I think, scale really fast and really quickly and done really well. And quite probably wouldn't have looked for investment for a second time anywhere near as quick. But in reality, we came out, we went live in August, we brought the team back together, a real core team of people that have been with us a while, that understood the business, that could help drive, that were passionate about what we were trying to build and really stuck together. We just got things done. Didn't matter whose job title it were or what task it were, it was just let's get things done and move forwards. And that's the first time we was able to almost pivot back to what that original vision was. Here's what we want to build. So let's go that. We introduced more product into our lineup, a better range. We went and pitched to some big leasing companies. I think in the first 4 months of bringing that back live, we pitched to 3 leasing companies. And we thought we had a good chance of winning one of them, and the other 2 were just potluck. If we win them or not, we don't know. Ended up securing contracts with all 3, which was great, but we had limited cash in the bank. We now need to scale. We need to grow volumes. We're going to double, triple, quadruple. We needed to figure out how we're going to grow and deliver that. Tried our best as we can again to sort of bootstrap it a little bit. And probably did just less than 9 months or so of bootstrapping it, trying to scale, and we just recognised that actually the volumes are just too great for us. We can't stretch the cash in the bank far enough. There were no bounce back loans available to us, anything like that, because we were a brand new business, so we weren't pre-COVID. No one was lending at the time. And then we'd also had things like the chip set issue that happened with chips in cars all of a sudden was depleted. People stopped manufacturing things. We had the Suez Canal incident, which meant stock couldn't get in the country, and all these little things that just affected our supply chain, that we couldn't get the products that we needed. So we'd done all these deals. We put all these products onto our website, and we were selling more and more, but there were no products in the UK. Couldn't get stock. So then products that we'd done deals for to buy X hardware at £300, and we sold that we'd sold 1,000 of them to people. We're just waiting for them. Got to the point where we had to go, actually, we just be able to deliver for those customers because we've promised on these large leasing companies, let's go and buy this piece of hardware, but we're having to pay $550 for it now. But I've still got to deliver it at that original price. So just really ate into our margin so we could deliver on some of the things. So really sort of chomped into that cash reserve that we had from the transaction that we did, and forced me down looking for a bit of investment sooner rather than later. Talked to a couple of different companies. We had a couple of different offers on the table. One of them was a smart metering business, but that was very much akin to the energy company that we was in. And I had a bit of reluctance to get back into that space because of some of the decisions that they made of running that. Although I could have protected myself a little bit within the contract, I just didn't want to get into those arguments of how to run that business, because in reality, to a degree, the sort of corporate ego that some of these businesses have is, if we're a smart meter installing business installing 5,000 smart meters a week, installing 500 charge points a week is not going to be an issue. But actually, it's just completely different. The customers are completely different. The type of product's completely different technically. And we had all those challenges within the energy company. I didn't want to go through that again. So we had an equal deal an equal offer from a mobility provider in the space. So Northgate Vehicle Hire, they made a bid, and we come to a conclusion and sold the business to them. They don't invest. They only do full acquisitions. So we ended up doing a full acquisition for that business. So for the second time, sold the business in July of 2021.
Wow.
Yes.
So now the business is done. It's sold. You've had your earn out. You've had your period of time out of the business.
Yeah. So sold that business 2021. Worked for it for another 3 years beyond that. Growing the business, scaling, winning contracts, bringing in new product sets, moving back into more renewables structure as well. Changed the way the business operates a little bit, really focusing on some of those large corporate deals. As we were sort of coming to the end of a period in time, we won a few more large contracts that are now sort of in fruition and live. So we did really well there, scaling that and growing that. As I left the business in December of 2024, left there, the business was around about 100 employees. So yeah, huge, did relatively well through that period of time. And I think now I've sort of moved on to take a bit of, I was supposed to take a little bit of a break, but I think as everyone does, as they exit that kind of business, got itchy fingers pretty quick. Set up a bit of a consultancy to go out there and support entrepreneurs, startups and businesses that want to scale in the e-mobility space.
So going back to that, eventually, I mean, you were looking for investment, but you ended up exiting. Yep. What did the numbers look like around that sort of time?
So I think it was sort of, as I said, we scaled back a little bit and built back up again. So it was finished off around that sort of 4-5 billion mark again as we got towards that. In revenues, like I say, 100 employees. A lot of within the e-mobility space, it's still young, it's still immature. There's still lots of things changing all the time. So there's lots of small pivots they have to do in that space, and a new tech that's constantly coming, new cars, new players coming into the market. So it's a challenging market. It's going through a period of consolidation over the last couple of years, and probably will for the next 12 months, I think. But as a business, with ChargedEVs to this day is still the biggest domestic installer in the market. And it sort of set itself above and beyond. It doesn't really compete with the rest of the installers in the space. It's not a manufacturer. It's not a lease or anything like that. It sort of sits in a pocket by itself. So it's set up to succeed really well going forwards.
When you think about the journey you've been on, selling a business twice, there was liquidation as part of it. There was redundancies. It's a full story, isn't it? When you reflect back to, we started this conversation about kind of your schooling and who were you when you left at school, but also who when you left school, and you've been on this unbelievable entrepreneurial journey. When you reflect back to who you were and now who you've become, what do you think about your life's journey?
So I think I could. So when I look back now, I can see signs of, okay, yeah, you can see those, and that's when I talk about the school system to a degree. There's not enough identifying those little quirks in people, those little things that quite often people look as being naughty or whatever it might be. Then now we've got all sorts of things in the mix, but I can see signs that actually this type of career, that entrepreneurial spirit, that creativity, that ability to pivot and things, I can see signs of that in my younger self. Never recognised them at the time, and no one ever told me about them. It was just, I was destructive in the classroom. I was trying to make everyone laugh. I was showing off, whatever it might have been. And then so I can see sort of signs where that was always embedded into me. But then as I've sort of gone through the journey that I've gone through and gone from those really dark places to having my daughter to setting up the business and scaling, going through all the things there, I just sort of look back on it with a sense of pride, but a sense of sort of really understanding that importance of resilience, because I think that's underlying any skill set that I've got. I don't think I'm the best at anything. I'm quite good at being. I'm operationally sound. I can sell a little bit. I think naturally the way I look at people ends up being more of a leader than a manager. I hate managing people. It's not my strongest skill set. I hate having difficult conversation with people. I'm much more of that. I want everyone to succeed and things. But when I sort of look back, resilience is the underpinning of everything that I think I've been able to be successful in since. I think that's one thing we don't teach enough of at schools. We don't teach enough of in parenting nowadays. And that's definitely something that I try to instill in as many people as I can that I talk to, whether it's mentoring them now, whether the people that have worked for me, a daughter, nieces, nephews. I think you've got to be resilient in life. The life doesn't care about anything that's happening. It just, the world and the planet just rolls on, just continues spinning no matter what's happening in your little world. It's insignificant. You've just got to be able to just throw that all aside and just keep carrying on with whatever your dream is, whatever your vision is, and things like that. The sort of things that I hold onto.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because at the beginning, where we started off, you kind of shared, I want to guess this was probably your late teens, early 20s, where you didn't necessarily have the vision, didn't have the dream. It was just to get a job as an apprentice, just going to see what happens. I wasn't really that aspirational. And it almost wasn't until you had your daughter and then suddenly, and I'm just trying to think, as a man, it was probably a level of responsibility that kind of made you become who you've become.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. Like that level of responsibility that it was for the first time I had to think about what the next 10, 20 years would look like for my daughter. So yeah, I think the level of responsibility is definitely in there. Like I said, I think that wanting to be looked back on when she's 18 and be proud that she's my daughter and that she talks about me fondly and all those kind of things. So yeah, I think that's the biggest trigger that I think for my success has definitely been that.
It's interesting, isn't it, that, you know, as men, there are often triggers, and parenting can be certainly a big part of that. Certainly my children being the best out of me, there's no question, you know, because I just want to be the best dad as I can be for them, because you know, that's just part of living a good life, is being a great father. When you think about resilience, because I think your story is all about resilience. It's about failing. It's about getting yourself back up. It's about resilience. And resilience isn't something that's taught ever, anywhere. But like, I feel like it should be. And I don't think there's necessarily, I mean, I could be wrong, but I can't think of a way that you can teach resilience until you go through things. But is there things that we can do as parents that encourages failure, experimentation, allowing people to make mistakes without chastising too heavily? Is there things that we do now, especially in the modern day parent, where it's quite protective, where you let them look after themselves, right? Now, I mentioned before, like, really younger, like bullying now, it's to a degree, there's got to be elements of things that happen in younger life that make you resilient. So I mentioned before that I was bullied when I was young. I can remember running home from school almost every night because I just wanted to get home as quick as possible so that the bullies didn't grab me and took me into a privet. And I took, like, some of my output of that is it's those things, those little things that I think as parents sometimes we can be too overprotective. I can't say it's very difficult for a school perhaps sometimes to teach resilience. It's not necessarily a course in it. But I think just those micro lessons that we can try to instill into people or into our children, I think can definitely have an impact. Yeah. I think about resilience a lot, of how to try and bring that into my children's life. But you're right. There's no course.
No.
You just have to encourage them to do things.
Yeah.
So when you're working and you're advising people who are at the beginning of their entrepreneurial journey, what sort of things are you sharing with them? Because it's almost like, how do you prepare someone for, are you ready to make 50 people redundant? Are you ready to have no cash in the bank and then you're about to go out of business tomorrow?
Yeah, I think it's for them. It's those stories, it's those things, and understanding what those things could be. So the idea of zero cash in the bank but paydays tomorrow, and you've got to figure it out, and you're chasing around everyone around. It's trying to find ways that you can instill those stories. And everyone's slightly different. I try not to do my sort of mentoring in a course book kind of way where it's the same presentation to everyone. It's much more conversational. It's figuring things out and talking through the challenges that they've had today and where they've come from and where they want to get to. But just finding ways that you can sort of interlock those stories of my experience, that you can encourage them to sort of consider these things and those plans. And like I say, finding ways, like being agile and being able to pivot. I think along with my resilience, it's that actually always been able to see that that ability to, well, what's next? What's the alternative? How do we get there? The vision's still the vision, but we might take a slight detour. And just trying to find ways that you can teach those through lessons and through stories and things is hugely valuable.
It's interesting because, like, just listening to you at the beginning of this story, we were talking about, I don't know what's the opposite of having a vision, not having a vision,
Yep.
kind of muddling through life as an apprentice. But then what you've mentioned quite a few times now as an entrepreneur and having the business, you've really focused around vision.
Yep.
What's the right vision? And I think that's broadly, it's not just for your business, it's also for your life, of where
Yes.
you're taking it.
Yep.
How important is it for someone to have a really clear vision of where they want to get to?
Hugely, even not in business. I mean, whenever I open my laptop nowadays, I've got a mood board as my screensaver, which has got all the things I want to try and achieve in life and things. And some of those are as simple as there's a random picture of a family sat in a palm tree somewhere. There's a picture of a couple holding hands in front of a beach. There's a beautiful house. There's cars. There's more holidays. There's other things on there. And I think just being able to visualize and see where you want to try and get to, and don't have I think we've probably gone almost too far to a degree that it's TikTok, social media, all these kind of things have probably made it a little bit more challenging. But went for a period of time where everyone wanted to be rich or famous and set yourself a goal, and it was almost like it's usually talked about. Now we've probably gone past that a little bit, where everyone talks about if you want to be rich, you're shallow. Whereas actually, no, you set yourself goals beyond where you think you can achieve to try and test yourself. Don't if you no matter what that barrier is, your goal should be higher. So I think, having the vision, regardless of whether it's for a business, for your family life, for personal life, for finances, whatever it might be, if you don't set yourself your vision, you're just wandering through a park aimlessly with no idea what's happening, and you'll end up where you'll end up. But it really gives some structure that you can look back on. So like I say, I have that mood board. I update it probably every 6 months. I have spreadsheets and planners. I'm a little bit in love with that kind of thing now, and trying to sort of update certain things and am I on track and that kind of thing. But I think it's hugely important to set targets and have that vision.
What's the best way of, by the way, let's go back to that mood board, because lots of people call it a vision board, or it could be, I don't know, just that mood board. How important is that for you to look at it and see it every day, like in terms of keeping you on track and moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's hugely important. Like I say, and that's the reason why I changed it. I probably, the first time I did it, I might have had the same one for 2 or 3 years, but I sort of recognised that over time my wants, my desires change. Through talking to my kids, my wife, they say things, and they talk about destinations they might want to try. So every time that happens, I update my mood board and sort of finessing it all the time. So I wouldn't necessarily keep it static. I think people change, and you where you want to get to in life should change, and your aspirations will change. But for me, it's just that constant reminder every time I, like I say, open my laptop or get back to my desktop. There's just something there, just sort of really as to why I'm doing it. Because it's easy, like I say, whether it be photos on your desk or a photo of your family, whatever it might be, and I've got those as well. But that board on as my screensaver is probably where I have that most interaction with that future Mark, that I want to be, that I want to become.
Do you think it makes a difference that it's visual, that you actually see it in pictures?
Just for me. I think everyone's different. Again, when you talk about learning styles and different things we mentioned earlier on, everyone will be different. For me, visual, I do have spreadsheets and things where I sort of write things down as well. But that visual element for me, I like to think I'm quite a creative person. I like to look and see things working. If I know when in business, our marketing team, whenever they bring anything to me, they give me like a sketch diagram of what a PDF is going to look like, and it's just black and white with a couple of words, and I can't visualize that. Just bring me the thing 80% done, and then I'll have a look at it and give you updates. So I'm very visually driven, but other people might be better off with bullet points, checklists, or spreadsheets, whatever it might be. Find out what works for you, what you can stay engaged with. I think being engaged with it is really important. That's why I think keep changing it on a regular basis, or updating it, or reviewing it at least. Even if it stays the same, you've reviewed it. But yeah, I think for me, visual works.
Yeah. I think it's definitely something with the mind and how you interpret a picture versus something when it's just written down. It's like, well, there's more, it's more emotive.
Yeah.
And it feeds into your soul in somehow of kind of guiding you forward of what's right.
Yeah, definitely. So like I say, I use the visual one for me. It's that, like I say, it's a motive. It's more engaging on a more regular basis. But I use the spreadsheet to bring me back to, okay, well, what am I doing about it? If that's your goal, and I set that 2 years ago, and that was going to be for 5 years' time. Am I 30-40% there? Am I on track for it? So yeah, I think different mediums for managing in different ways. But ultimately, have a vision of where you want to be in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, what it looks like, what's your retirement look like, all those things, and just try and strive for it.
What other sorts of advice do you share with entrepreneurs at the beginning? I know it's going to be based on their specific situation, but is there frameworks? Is there what sort of advice can you give to someone who's starting out today?
So a lot of what we do in, or the types of business that I work for, I sort of work on it's what I did within ChargedEV, and it's what I'll do in a future business when decide to sort of start again. But making sure you've always got into mind what you sort of free. I like to work in frees. There was a framework once called Just Free Things that we had at the energy company, and it's just like you can really focus on 3 things at any one time, and within that, things might spiral off as you go down from teams, as you grow. The 3 things for me as the leader will be different to what the 3 things are at the bottom, but just really trying to everything connected back. So I use a bit of that as a framework on 3 things to focus on. But for me, it's always making sure you sort of focus on the people in the business as a founder. You get the right people around you, look after them, treat them well, make them want to be there. So much happens in startups on the goodwill of the people that are in the business that you lose as you start going into corporate life a little bit. That goodwill disappears because you're part of a corporate that's making millions and billions and things. But as a founder, if you can sell that mission, if you can talk about it in the right way and get those people really engaged, the rest looks after itself. Don't be as scared to be the least qualified or least knowledgeable person in the room. That's where you should be as a founder. The people that you're around you should be there. If you're only employing people because you're going to be better than them, then the wrong people. Get people around you that challenge you as a person, and challenge or willing to stand up and challenge your thoughts and your leadership as well, and things. I think that's really important. And then the other thing is, depending on what it is as a business you're doing, is focus on the customer, the end user. Make sure you're developing and designing things for them. See too many businesses that just get into the mindset where they talk about what works for us as a business because it might tick this box or drive that revenue. They completely forget who's going to use it at the end of it. Then when they finally come to an end product, they've put it out there. It's just people don't engage with it because they've not done the little things that actually end users want out of it. So I think, for me, focusing on people and customers is hugely important to any business.
Feels like it's the most foundational part, isn't it? People, products.
It's the one that people forget.
People, products, customers.
Yep.
Getting it right for your customers, like it's pretty critical.
Yep.
You're right. I've been in businesses before where we've focused on what's the revenue model we want to have.
Yes.
And we've forced that model. And then the customer goes, that's not what we're looking to buy.
Yep.
We want to buy your services. We want to engage with you. However, not in this model.
Yep.
I'm not like this. So it's like and sometimes in that business is where I found, we were pushing a particular reoccurring revenue model, a managed service essentially. It just wasn't always hitting where the market was. The market wasn't quite like that.
Yep.
So you then start to niche. So you start turning away good opportunities and revenue for very niche opportunities. And we just think, well, we're leaving a lot on the table here. Yep. Don't we want to? But I think in that particular business, the business wanted to be really super focused on what it was that we were doing. And that's fine, but it reduces the market significantly to very, very small few customers.
As I said earlier, like sort of coined the term that I use with people, which is like chronic failures. Fail fast. Start building something, but get the simplest form of it out to people as soon as possible to test it. Doesn't matter if it's a little bit archaic, doesn't matter if it's spreadsheet, whatever the simplest way of getting and testing that business model out and that product, get it out to people quicker. You'll get much more feedback much quicker. Stop trying to get to the finished product and launching that in 12 months' time. What can we do in 3 months? What can we do in 6 months' time? How do you keep testing that? And then you iterate it. I guarantee the end products that you'll have in 12 months' time will be completely different. And you'll have learned a lot along that way and you'll be much more successful. Definitely seen businesses that just focus on staying in the background, building for 12 months, 2 years, then they launch and it just doesn't deliver what they expect it to deliver.
And what you said about people was really interesting. You know, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, as a leader, not to be the smartest person in the room.
Yep.
Yeah, that feels like great advice, because, you know, bringing in people that are smarter than you in particular areas, that feels like one of the best things you possibly could do, surrounding yourself with great people.
Yeah, and obviously it's different depending on who the founder is. If it's a founder from a tech business and they've got all the technical knowledge, it's just it's recognizing your skill sets, where you can play, and what you need to complement that with. But even there, never be scared to bring people in that know more than you, or can outshine you. If in reality, I think I made that mistake. If I look back, I probably should have brought someone in as an MD of the business, and me stepped aside and been whatever chief commercial officer, whatever it might have been, of the business sooner. Because I'm okay operationally, but there's definitely people there that are better, that could have been better than me, and I could have focused on the bits that I think I excel at, which is getting in front of people, selling what we do, not worrying so much about the day to day. So I've not delivered what in the past, and I've learned from that, and I sort of give that advice out there. Don't always think you've got to be the CEO of a business if you're not right for it. Bring people in.
And what's the future for you? You've been through one hell of a journey, a hell of a life journey. I'm so pleased you've shared it. What's the future look like?
So I've sort of left the business. I've set up a consultancy that we're doing today. And originally that was just going to act as a consultancy, so I can do some consultancy projects here and there, a couple of fractional roles for maybe a year or 18 months, and then see what the future holds. I do have itchy feet every now and then about starting something. I've got a few ideas and things that I think could work, but I'm just sort of letting the market plan out. I think we're going through a bit of a consolidated phase in the e-mobility space. But in reality, I think some of the contracts that have come my way and the things that I'm talking about, we've just employed our first person to support me. So I think we're probably more heading towards building a bit of a multidisciplinary consultancy within the e-mobility space, but bringing in people that understand the fleet side specifically, people that understand the customer journey, people that understand marketing, and therefore we can go into these startups and almost be we can have a multi-pronged approach to how we help drive their growth through one consultancy. They can get access to not just me, but my team that can deliver expertise in a number of different areas. And we might have one startup that we have a fractional chief marketing officer in there, fractional chief commercial officer, whatever it might be. And that seems to be where we're going. Still undecided if that's the definite approach, but that feels like a natural next step. And then we'll see where that takes us probably over the next 12, 18 months. But beyond that, I do have itchy feet around starting something as well. So I'm not sure. We'll see.
It's an exciting journey, whatever's going to happen next. Do you feel optimistic about the future?
Yeah, very. The first 6 months we've come out of that business and some of the things that we've managed to do and conversations that we're having, I'm extremely optimistic. I think I've probably developed a few sort of non-negotiables now in going forward, and in terms of the sort of level of flexibility that I want from a personal point of view, and I want to be able to experience more holidays and time off with my kids and family. So not quite sure jumping back into full corporate life would work. But as long as I can get that balance right, I'm optimistic that we can.
I'm interested in your non-negotiables. What are they?
I think it's that family time. It's recognising that some of my biggest regrets, and it's difficult to regret because when I look back, and I sort of see this now that you see it, lots of people going on, they're doing podcasts and they talk about things, and there's probably been a bit of a culture of looking at sort of the grind and calling it toxic, because entrepreneurs get into a room and they work 12, 16 hours a day and you can have a better work-life balance. But the reality is often the people that are successful saying that have probably done that in the last 10 years. So there's an element of that grind to a degree, and I think it's really important that people recognise that. But when I sort of look back on my journey, as much as my eldest daughter was my biggest inspiration, I missed so much of her younger childhood. For the first 8 or 9 years, I was working 6-7 days a week, every week, long days, late nights. Didn't see her first steps, didn't hear her first words, missed out on weekends, birthdays, holidays, all those kind of things. So for me, my non-negotiables are being able to have that flexibility to spend time. And like now, still work away every now and then, but we make sure we have holidays. We make sure at weekends we're spending time together. I'm trying to get into their hobbies and make sure that we can deliver things for them. And and have that family time to make up for those probably first 8 years of my oldest daughter's life.
That's the bit about entrepreneurship that people don't always realise, is that you're then fully committed to making this thing work, making this business work, and then family life always takes a backseat.
Yeah. And like I say, crazy. I can remember my granddad's funeral. Stepped out of the wake afterwards, a working man's club, to go and do a business call. Everyone was in there grieving. I'd spent the morning in tears, and then stepped out to go and have that. And then just little things that you sort of do to sort of really try and sort of drive the business forward and stay on top and keep things going. It's such a priority. Everything else becomes second priority at that point. But I'm sure some people have done it other ways. I'm sure some people have always been able to grow that business, and they've managed to keep their priorities right, and they've spent the time with their family. I wasn't able to. It became my life, and my family was there. But like I said, I missed so much of that. Now my non-negotiables are that I get to spend time with them, and it doesn't affect that.
I don't know anyone who's progressed really well in business and they haven't had that period where there's been the grind.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know anybody. But the thing is, sometimes you do that grind before the children.
Yes.
And then it's fine. Like, my grind period was before the children. When I was working 12, 15, 16 hours a day, that was before children. I was with my girlfriend, now wife, at the time. But you know, there was a period of time where you do go through those things. Yeah. But I think, I don't know anyone who's trying to build a great business and getting the balance perfectly right with family. No. I just don't feel like that's. Yeah. I don't feel like they go
achievable.
No, and it's like you almost have to kind of make a decision at that time, like where you're going to put your energy and your focus. And the funny thing is, you might be trying to do the best thing you possibly can as a father to provide to your family, but that also means you have to be at the office.
Yep.
It's a real. I feel like sometimes it's really unfair and unspoken that what dads have to go through to provide. Like that stress of trying to provide, trying to be the best dad you can, but also then having to be at the office, but then not being present.
Yeah, and it definitely has been over the last sort of 10, 20 years, I think, as entrepreneurship's really sort of kicked off. And now you've women now that are getting more into entrepreneurship, and in fact, lots of female founders now that'll be going through similar scenarios and having children, but needing to get back in within 3 months rather than taking the sort of full maternity period. So yeah, it's parenthood and entrepreneurship don't mix well, but they're quite often the biggest inspiration for it, and it's just one of those things you've got to work through and do the best you can, but not feel too guilty about it in the long run.
It's funny because I often think in a lot of life, what I've learned, there's always a paradox. There's always paradoxical situations, which is exactly that. You're trying to do the best thing you can for your child, but the paradox of that is you're at the office, or you're trying to earn great money for a business or however you're going to do it, building something. So therefore, she can have private education, or she can have a good education, for example. But it means you're not there. And it's like, well, where am I supposed to be? What's the right thing to do? And you're left with this paradox.
Yeah,
I feel like a lot of entrepreneurial parents will be there.
Yeah,
not
definitely.
just entrepreneurial, just anyone in the corporate world.
Definitely. I think, and then going back to what we were saying a couple of moments ago around doing those things because you want to give them the best life possible. But actually doing that, you're then wrapping them up in cotton wool to a degree, and you give them everything that they want and need, that they don't learn those. Or take those moments that actually build up resilience to a degree, because they don't have to go through the same strife that we went through as kids to buy something. They want some trainers, go get some trainers. Cool. If you want to go on, let's go on holiday twice a year. So it's difficult. You want to be able to do that. To spend time, but actually, is it the best thing? Do they need a little bit of strife in their life to be able to sort of develop that resilience that you need? So it's a real difficult balance, and it's definitely something that I'm going through now, just trying to figure out how we sort of navigate it.
Yeah. It's a funny thing, isn't it? Because you want to protect them from it, but you also want them to learn resilience at the same time. Yeah.
And I think more so going forward, I think I've said for the past couple of years that our parents had it easier than we probably had it, but our kids are going to have it considerably harder than what we've had it to try and get on the property ladder, get into sort of financial, a good financial foundation. So yeah, I just think the biggest important lesson is just don't hold yourself to account too much when it comes to it. Just do the best you can in the scenario you're in. The decision you're making will probably end up being the right decision. It's just you've just got to flow with it a little bit. Try not to be too hard on yourself, whichever way you're going. If you're spending too much time in the office or whatever it might be, parenting is a real challenge, especially when you've got that career mix in there as well.
Yeah, it's a tough challenge. It's the toughest challenge. Listen, I've loved speaking to you today. So
You too, thank you.
So thank you. But before we close, a lot of today's conversation was about you having resilience going through your darkest period.
Yep.
And really the point of that was for us to show that you can get through it, and then also you can turn your life into something really positive if you have the right motivation. Your time, your situation is your daughter, but then you've turned it into something really positive. And now you've turned out as someone who's sold a business twice. You're an expert in your field. You know, and now you're at the stage of, right, I need balance with my family plus corporate the corporate life. If someone was listening today and they're going through a difficult time or that dark time as we discussed, what can you share with them, words of wisdom of someone who's been through it? You've been through those darkest days. What can you share with them to kind of help them come along on this journey?
I think just being aware that it can and it will get better. Like I say, it's find something that gives you that motivation. Find some element of positivity that you can grab onto, and leverage it as best you can. To sort of drive forwards. Talk to people. Don't be silent. Don't hold it all in. Try and talk to people, whether they're partner, parents, siblings, whatever it may be, friends, strangers, whoever it is. I think definitely talk to people more is one, and be more open with that, with the challenges you're going through. But it can and it will get better. You've just got to work at it, and it's not going to get better easily. There's not going to be a straight trajectory up to as it gets better. There's going to be times where you have a couple of months and you start to see that positive light, and then something happens and it drops you back down in. But just recognise it will get better, and you've got to put the work in. It's not easy, but you've just got to keep moving forwards. And like I said, just find something that gives you some positivity, some motivation, and try and grasp onto that.
It's interesting because I think what you're sharing today is that your darkest times was part of your story. Mm-hmm. And it's something that also set you up for success, because the underlining piece here is resilience. Because then in entrepreneurism, you're like, well, hang on, this is challenging, but it's not as bad as that. So therefore it gave you some level of resilience in the boardroom, trying to make very tough decisions.
Yep. And it's those dark times that now make everything else positive, even sweeter than they were. If I'd have just had a nice straight college, university, set up a business off you go, it'd feel great. But just knowing that you've had those dark times and those challenges, and you've worked your way through something, which makes it even better. And you look back with a sense of pride that you perhaps wouldn't otherwise.
Well, I had some quite dark times for a period of time, about 5 years ago, and I was in quite deep depression for about 3 years. And now I understand it, that the reason that needed to happen was that it was resetting me on a new path. Mm-hmm. Like I was on the wrong journey. I was just on the wrong trajectory for my life. And now I can sit back and reflect on that time and go, that's part of my story, to get context, to know where I'm trying to get to. Yep. And it's almost like a resetting and kind of someone shaking you, some sort of bigger force shaking you to say, like, you're not on the right path here. Like there's something. Now I think in your situation, the thing that pulled you forward in some respects was that overarching responsibility for your daughter. I feel like it's just whatever you can find as a level of positivity to bring you, and it won't feel like positivity at the time. It's just anything you can cling on to. Yeah, definitely. Look at every superhero film. They all have that story arc, effectively. Again, whatever it is whatever tools you can take, and from the conversation today, or anything that's out there, take those tools and just try and put them in rewrite your story, whatever way you look at it. That's a great, what you said there is a great way to position it. That's what you've got to do, is find something that gives you a story or a conversation that you can have with yourself around where you are, what you need to do, what you need to do next, what's the steps. It's very difficult in the time, in the moment, but just wallowing in it is not a way to go. You've got to look for that way out. You've got to find it. You've got to fight for it. Difficult, but you've got to do it. Yeah, difficult, and it goes on for years often, and you just have to find a way through it and think, this will be part of my story one day. And actually, this is this is some part of the world teaching me about myself.
Yes.
And there's a brilliant, so what we kind of, you said about superheroes, there's something called, you've probably heard of it, called The Hero's Journey.
Yep.
And there's an amazing film on YouTube called Finding Joe.
Yes.
Have you seen it?
Yeah.
And that is essentially it's breaking down the hero's journey, what it is. So whenever I've been going through a dark time or a difficult time, I watch that film. It's a real feel-good film, but it also shows you, it kind of gives you an understanding of where you are on your own hero's journey.
Yep.
And when a lot of people go through a lot of people go through depression or low mood, or they're in a challenging time. And it's like, what's that telling you about where you are in your life? And then where does that fit in terms of your overarching hero's journey? So I love Joe Rogan always talks about it. He goes, like, you're the star character in your own movie. Where are you? Where are you in that hero's journey? I feel it's a great way of kind of just thinking about it.
It is, and like I say, there's many tools out there. There's many things that you can use, and if we get the one that you can buy into the most and just work with it, that's the biggest. You've got to want to get out of it, and you've got to be willing to work to get out of it. But you've got to figure out what that mechanism is, and understanding that journey is vastly important.
Amazing. Well, I've loved our chat today. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. You too.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.